Hi, Sarah.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. I'm getting pretty sleepy, but it's going well. How are you doing?
Pretty dead.
Yeah. Well, I've also been here since
Yeah,
9 a.m. Yeah.
yeah. I'm not used to this anymore. I had 5 weeks where I didn't even hardly look at a computer screen, like
Oh,
sitting there
I
going,
know.
oh, my head.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry.
God.
Get a
Ah,
good sleep after this and no more training days till next semester.
yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Kenzie. Nice to see you.
Hey, nice to see you again.
Hi,
You've
Tiffany.
been at every training day I've been to so far, and I'm so
Oh, yeah.
happy about it. Yep,
Oh, I'm happy too. Yeah, today is the day that I loaded all the training stuff, and then I only have a few tomorrow.
that's good. Yeah, I decided to do 3 today and 3 tomorrow.
That's smart.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm doing good, and you?
Good. How have you been doing with the WMC? Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a lot of watching. I counted up all of the videos I was watching because I put it on the notes, and like in total, my hours today was like 7.5. So I've been doing a lot.
You don't have to watch all of them. I hope you know that.
I know, but I figured, I don't have any classes today, so I was like, I gotta knock it out. So
I mean, you get extra
Uh,
money, so why not?
True.
yeah.
Don't forget that training days are paid days.
Yep,
Yep.
that's
Paid
smart.
hours. Okay, and
That's a
with
lot.
Sabrina here, I think we have everybody. Hooray. Thank you guys all for attending. I'm very excited and it makes me really happy because I don't think I've done one on my own before. And I prepared a PowerPoint for you guys, so I will go ahead and share that. Hi, Sabrina. Hi. Let's see. Share screen. Share my screen and we'll present it. Okay, so I know you've already seen the title before, but basically this workshop is called Interpersonal and Metacognitive Tutoring Strategies. Now, these two words you might be kind of familiar with, and we'll go more in depth with them into the presentation. But when I talk about strategies, we're kind of talking about tips and tricks, things you can do. And the concepts I talk about, thank you, the concepts I talk about you've probably heard about them before and you'll probably see them cross-referenced a lot through other workshops and other courses. But I think it can be really helpful to kind of learn things through a bunch of different names and through a bunch of different facets, the same thing again and again, because you'll become a master of it. And I'm really hoping in this workshop too, that I can gain some interpersonal and metacognitive insights from all of you because you all have a lot of wonderful experience to share. And I really want to harness that here today. So yeah, my name is Dorothy, by the way. I know my name's here, but it's also right there. And I'm really happy to see new and old tutors. So let's get started. Let's see. I click the next button, yes. But it does not listen to me. There we are. Okay, so before we define interpersonal skills and metacognitive skills, let's first talk about kind of the importance of it. And I wanted to do it through two quotes that I'm paraphrasing here. So there's this saying that was not originated by, but was popularized by the prolific writer Maya Angelou that goes, people will not remember what you said or did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And this is really important because you can think back to any recent college course you've had. And the first thing you probably think about is how that course made you feel, right? Did this make me feel really smart because I was really good at it? Did it make me feel like, did it give me kind of this imposter syndrome because I really struggled in it? And people tend to reflect back on their teachers this way too, and their support systems, right? You think about a teacher, the first thing you think of is how they made you feel. And if you make someone feel welcome and like you're their support, they're more likely to reach out to you for help and to be open with you with what their writing needs are as a tutor. So that's why this is such an important concept and why interpersonal skills really hit on this core idea in tutoring, right? And then the other idea, this is kind of an idea, and if you are new to tutor, you will probably see this come up in your Unit of 299 class right away. And it's kind of a philosophy of our writing center, but it's the essential idea that it is more helpful to give someone a writing skill than a finished paper. It's very similar to that old saying of like, teach a man like to fish is better than to give him a fish, because then instead of eating for one day, he will eat his whole life, which is really, really great. Same idea here. So when we talk about metacognitive skills, it's a little different. It's about being meta, as in being very self-aware, breaking the fourth wall of yourself. It's about learning about how you learn and how you think as a writer, so that you can understand why you're doing what you're doing and then modify it on your own, which is like teaching yourself. It's really cool. So if you can help guide someone to do that, you can give them a skill that they can then carry on to all their papers in the future, and make it so that instead of being, I guess, reliant on a sort of fix-it-shop situation, they can then just keep adding skills to their tool belt. And that's what we want, right? So here are the two ideas that I think highlight the importance of these two concepts of interpersonal skills and metacognitive teaching. So let's go a bit more into those definitions, right? Because anytime we start a course or learn about anything, the first thing we want to do is kind of hardcore define it, so that we can build and connect things through those basic definitions, right? So you've probably heard the word interpersonal before. It has to do with relationships, but also is defined by having to do with communication between groups of people or two people, right? And so in a tutoring session, those are usually one-on-one things, and they have that personal aspect to them. And we're going to talk today about these stages that you might find naturally occur with an introduction, connection, and encouragement stage throughout a tutoring session. And then metacognitive, I talked a little about this. This is basically defined as thinking about one's thinking, with meta being self-awareness and cognitive being the way you think, right? And so we're going to talk less about stages in this and more about these modalities of the teaching. You want it to be, in order to make it metacognitive, you want it to be explanatory. So you want to explain things and you want them to explain things back to you, because explanation is the why behind everything we're figuring out. Then we also have reflective. We want to think back on that explanation we gave, and where did that come from? Where did my learning roots come from, right? And then finally, self-guided teaching. So now that we've shown them like explanatory and reflective ways to tackle a concept, now have them do it on their own, right? And just watch them go. Be very amazed. Right, so let's jump right into our interpersonal strategies. So like I said, first stage, right? We're going to have the introduction. So here's some tips. First one, very easy first one to do. Names tend to equal familiarity. And that's the first thing you want, because familiarity as an interpersonal concept is kind of the key concept in marketing even. If they show you this brand enough times, you are more likely to trust that brand. You're more likely to turn to that brand when you are just thinking in your mind, hey, what do I need? You'll think, oh, I've seen commercials for Kleenex. That's what I need. So this is a concept where the more familiar you are with something, again, the more likely you are to trust it. And this has to do with people too. So names are very powerful. So I'd say when you have a tutoring session, it's a good idea to remember to introduce yourself by your name, and also to get their name and use it a few times. Like, if I say, my name's Dorathy, what's your name? And they'll probably give it. They'll be like, my name is like Jimothy. And I'll be like, okay, Jimothy, well, you did a really good job with this one part. That builds that familiarity, and they're more likely to open up to you, right? And then a good step right at the beginning of the tutorial session is basically a vibe check or mood check, if you will, right? You want to figure out first the state that they're at by just asking, how are you feeling about this assignment, right? And they'll let you know. Maybe they're like feeling really tense about it, or maybe they're feeling really good about it. You want to figure out where they're at so that you can, and you might be worried. You might be saying, Dorathy, I'm kind of nervous about checking in with people's moods, because again, you might feel like that derails from the assignment that you're trying to focus on, or possibly you're not sure to deal with some intense emotions someone might reveal to you. And I still think that this is really helpful, because after you get what their mental state is in the moment, you can use that and help turn their attention and their energy back to the assignment by then, in the next step, relating to the mood or letting them know that you're a support, right? And the way this can work out is if they're feeling really excited about it, you can say, oh yes, I felt really excited about a paper before too. I've written a similar paper like this. Let's start talking about papers like this, right? Or say they're feeling in a certain way and you don't have a specific scenario that you can relate to from it, but you want to let them know that you're a support for what they're going through. So they're like, hey, I'm really, really nervous about this paper. You let them know, hey, well, I'm here to support you in writing this paper in the time that we have here. So we'll get right to it and we'll make sure we can get as much done as we can so that you feel more confident about it, right? So that addresses their mood and then also redirects their attention back towards the paper while kind of letting them know, right, a little bit about you in that interpersonal way. So these are my recommendations for the introduction stage. And again, you might not have to ask these. You might find that these happen very naturally because they might sit down and say, hey, my name is Jimothy and I'm having the worst day of my life right now. And then you can go right from there with the relator support, right? Right. So then when you get to start talking about the paper, that's where the connection stage would come in, I would say, and this is more about show, don't tell. So the biggest thing about after becoming familiar with the tutee, letting them know that you're really here to support them and that they can trust you with like their intellectual property, for lack of a better term, right, is basically just listening to them and listening to them genuinely. Because when you listen to someone genuinely, it's the most basic way to show that you respect them, right, and you respect their ideas. So what are some good ways? I mean, you all are wonderful listeners as you're demonstrating to me right now, and I really, really appreciate it. But how do you really show someone, and what helps you be a genuine listener? Because as a tutor, you're there, you're trying to detect higher order concerns, and you're trying to think about a way to tell them to your tutee in a way that's productive and kind. And yet you also are trying to listen to them at the same time. That's a lot. That's a lot on your mind, and it makes it hard to genuinely listen, right? So what I recommend doing is note taking. So note taking allows you to do this listening, because if you write down what their concerns are at the beginning and what concerns you notice are, when they tell you about something, you can put your little paper down or your MacBook or whatever you're taking notes on and listen to what they're saying seriously so that you can also genuinely address it. And then you can pick up your paper and remember what it is you really wanted to share with them. So that's my first point there. And then my second little tip for helping with genuine listening and authentic listening is time blocking. So this is about letting them know that you heard what they said. As in, you say you're taking notes, you listen to them, you respond, and then you time block like, hey, we can spend the next 5 minutes focused on this thing that you just told me is really important to you. And that is another demonstration that you listen to them and kind of honoring that, right? Other little things is just nodding when people say things and even repeating back to them what they just said. Also ways you can show, hey, I genuinely listened to you and that means I value what you had to say. Right, so next we get to the encouragement stage, and this is pretty much the end of the tutoring session, right? It's when it's kind of happens when you're giving a recap. You might find that you already let them know what their writing and learning strengths were in the session and what you accomplished. That might come naturally to you, but it's always a good idea and it's a good place to put that in, because that again reinforces that you are here to support them, right? And kind of it influences that part about like, okay, well, how did you feel coming into this, leaving this tutoring session, right? You want to feel encouraged to continue working on those strengths and to feel like your intellect is valued, right? So go ahead, let them know what their strengths were that you saw and how far they developed just in this session. And then of course, encourage them to visit the WMC. Let them know that you're going to continue, we as an institution want to continue being their support. So just like with the regular tutoring session, how it's recommended, hey, let them know how they can make different kinds of appointments from asynchronous to in-person to online. Go ahead and let them know they can come to the WMC again, that not only you are a support, but all the other tutors are here to support them and be that same kind of familiar body to them, right? So after I've just gone over that, are there any little questions on any of these interpersonal strategies or big questions? Well, thank you for this next part. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to, after this presentation, share a link to you guys in the chat for it so you'll have it. But what I'd really like to do, like I was saying earlier, is consult all of you for what are the interpersonal strategies that you have from your life and tutoring experience, or your experience as someone who has been tutored or been a student. I would love to hear the different things that you use, and you can go ahead and put them in the chat. And afterwards, I will go ahead and put them on this slide, though, since we're doing really well on time. If you guys would like to share with each other now and discuss it while you're putting your strategies in the chat, what do you guys usually do with tutoring, or what have you seen teachers do with that, really create that interpersonal demonstration that you're a support and that trust?
I definitely try to let them know that like I'm a student too and I understand what they're going through, and I know that like papers are really stressful, speeches can be super stressful. So just trying to relate to them might help them feel like they're not alone. Because I feel like sometimes if they were to go to their professor or something, it could be more intimidating. But since they're coming to a student that understands, it could make them feel a little bit better about the assignment.
I think that is such a good point, Kenzie, because it's so true. I mean, our titles at the WMC aren't even tutor, they're listed as peer consultant, because that's what we are, and that's what we want to show to them, that, oh, we're students too, we're your peers. And Sabrina, I don't know if you want me to read your quote or if you want to say it. Yeah.
I can go ahead and do it if you want. Yeah, so I pretty much exactly what Kenzie was saying. I really like to relate to them. So if they're struggling with something, I'll mention that I also struggle with something. So like, especially like if it's something that I do struggle with. So if they talk about, how they can't get the paper organized, their professor complained about the organization, I'll be like, well, I struggle with it. Here's what I did personally, but don't worry, like, because I think it humanizes you, and it lets like you're not some tutor up above floating in the ether. You're someone there with your own struggles, and first of all, they can succeed just like you've succeeded. I think that's the crux.
That's really good, pointing to like also the getting through it, right? Yeah. And then Sophia, I see you have a similar comment here, so it's really cool. You guys all have like this sense of this camaraderie with your tutees, and that's already really great, right? Sophia, did you want to say or explain yours? Did you want me to?
No, I can. I just obviously I haven't tutored, so I don't have an opinion on that or experience on that. But something that I've really liked about my professors is when they'll mention something that a student had, said earlier in the semester or a few classes ago, and I'm like, oh wow, even though you're teaching 4 or 5 different classes, you still remembered that like one little fact about this one student in one of your classes. Like it just really makes me feel like, oh, they really do like listen and care what we say.
Oh, yeah, something a student told. Yeah, that is really cool. I can really relate to that too, actually, because my microbiome professor, whenever he would like go onto his slides, because I would ask a question, I wouldn't even be saying something that I thought was intelligent. I'd be asking a question. Sometimes you feel silly asking a question, but I'd be like, why does this happen? And then when he goes back to lecture, he'd be like Dorathy was saying, and I'd be like, I didn't even feel like I was making a point there, but teachers, they'll do that when they do that genuine listening to you, right? Yeah. Since Sabrina will be a great teacher.
Going off of
She's
what you said
already
there,
got-
Dorothy, sorry,
Mhm.
I think that's really insightful. And I also think it helps when like the tutee is asking you a question and you're like, oh, that's a really good question. It's like not because maybe they might feel like dumb for asking the question, like it's an obvious answer, but it's always nice to say like, oh no, that's a really good question. I definitely try to do that.
That is such a good point. Thank y'all for these really good ideas. I'm gonna try to put these on this workshop notes thing later so that not only you guys, but also the workshop that comes in tomorrow morning will see. So your other fellow tutors. Any other last points, or do you guys want to go on to metacognition? All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to go rolling over to the next slide. So, there we go. Okay, so metacognition, as we were saying, 3 different ideas that can play into your strategies of how you encourage this metacognitive thought happening. What's the point I wanted to make here? Oh, that I am very passionate about metacognition, not only because it was something that was introduced to me by Sohi and Abby with the Writing Center when I first got here, but also because I did my research in Univ 299 on it as a part of transfer theory, which I thought was really, really interesting, because transfer theory is just the idea of transferring knowledge over from a teacher to a student and how much is retained. But metacognition is really neat because it has to do not just with retaining taught knowledge, but also calling upon what the tutee already knows and, really making that of great importance to their learning, because that's everybody, right? You build up your learning strategies. So let's go into this first point. You want to make, when you're tutoring, you want to incorporate this explanatory style, right? So we talk a lot about checking the prompt as the very first thing, because you want to figure out what kind of assignment is this, and is the student answering the prompt, because that's a higher order concern, right? And you'll hear that word a lot if you're a new tutor. But a good idea actually, and something that I like to do, is have them explain the assignment before a prompt check. This usually doesn't take a lot of time because they'll usually let you know in colloquial terms, oh, it's a this kind of paper, right? But have them explain the assignment before the prompt check, because then it allows them to compare how they conceive the assignment, and then how our deep dive into what the assignment is compares together. And it lets them consider, oh, did I understand the prompt when I read it the first time? It's always helpful for anybody to read again with another person, but it gives that real insight, right? And then you can explain the why of basic writing concepts. So not just for basic writing concepts, but it's especially important here. Just explain, so say you're going over the prompt and it differs from what their explanation of the assignment is. Explain like the why the assignment is different than what they thought it was, right? Like, oh, we might want to consider that it needs to be a research paper with articles cited, because right here, the teacher used this word, empirical articles, in your evidence, right? And so that gives them this kind of keyword they can look out for in the future. It's the why, and it gives them, it gives them the basis for figuring out things on their own in the future, right? And this also applies, like I was saying, to basic writing concepts. Even if your tutor says they know what a thesis is, you might still want to let them know respectfully, like, that this is what a thesis is, or ask them to explain what a thesis is to you, right? And let them know, oh, like, that's a very good point. I was also taught like this about theses, and it might be helpful to you, right? So not discounting their knowledge, but also adding to it with the very ground level explanations. And then next, say you come to a piece in the writing and you're not sure exactly how it fits in, or if it's answering the prompt. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but maybe you're a little bit confused as a tutor, and this is natural to happen. But go ahead and ask them what they intended to do with a weaker writing area that you find. Because if they do that explaining to you about like, oh, I was just trying to say this and this, then you get a greater understanding, and then you can help them to think up how they might want to explain it following the prompt closer, or whatever the goal is, right? Any questions about the explanatory tutoring? Yeah, it's a lot of question asking, as you'll find most metacognitive strategies are. It's a lot of asking questions to the tutee, because oftentimes we'll find that tutees often answer their own questions, right? In the chat. Yeah, thank you. Yes, asking intentions, very helpful for both you and your tutee. So next, let's talk about the reflective part of this. So this is also helpful when you're talking about the prompt, or you ask them to explain the assignment. Say, oh yeah, it's a creative writing about sci-fi. You could say, so have you done this writing before, and how did you do it? This allows them to call upon their past knowledge, their past writing knowledge, which everybody does have, right? Because we've all most likely written something before if we reach the college level. So yeah, say, have you done creative writing before, and how did you do it? And then they'll probably say, oh, well, I use this and this and this. And then you'll see what they already have in their tool belt, and you can help them grow that, right? Like, oh, even if you're watching an area where they're like, oh, what did you intend to do here? It'll make a lot more sense if they talk about having done that in the past. And you could say, oh, but you did this really cool thing in the past. Did you do that here too? And show me how you did it, right? It also allows them to think about their learning. Another good question that doesn't necessarily have to do with explaining skills or writing is ask them what they want to gain from the appointment with you, right? Because sometimes we'll be on a different page with the tutee about what they want from the appointment. We might look at a paper and we have all these values, right? We want to get right to the higher order concerns. We want to make it as strong as we can, but it's important to first see what do they want to gain from the appointment, because not only does it let you understand, oh, I have to prioritize things differently because I'm ultimately helping you with your journey in writing, but it also allows them to reflect on what learning is about for them, if that makes sense, what the tutoring appointment is about for them. And it allows them to engage more deeply with you, because if they're like, oh, well, I did want to really focus on just learning how to like write a thesis, then it gets them in the mindset to start really gaining from that experience, right? And then simply, as we've been hinting to through all of these, ask, well, what helps you learn? Would you like it if I gave examples or explanations better? Right? A lot of people are visual, they want to see it written out in a bunch of examples. And this can be really helpful too, as I was just discussing with Milo about for people who are multilingual or English is a more difficult language for them. Seeing a bunch of examples of how to use a convention or phrase can be very, very helpful, right? And for metacognition too, just call back on what has helped you learn before. And then not only can it help you have a better tutoring session, but it can help them learn things on their own later as well and use things. Any questions about reflective styles of tutoring? Just asking them to self-reflect in a very meta way. All right, and then self-guided. So explanatory, reflective, and self-guided will probably happen in about chronological order, but it can be kind of all over the place in the tutoring session. But you might notice once you've been explaining things to them and you've been asking them how they learn best and then giving them examples based on how they best learn, you can start asking them guided questions that they can ask themselves later. Like, for example, if they say, oh, I'm not very used to doing the Oxford comma after the and, you can go ahead and ask them guided questions after you show them how to do it. You could say, oh, have you noticed that you list out things here? Where do you think you can break up a list and how? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember how to use the Oxford comma. That's where I can use this. So these kind of guided questions or nudging questions, as I've also heard it said, right? Or like, this can really tie into questions like with what you intend to do, right? You can let them know, oh, ask yourself what you intend to do if you ever read something and it seems out of place, because then you can think about it deeper and ask yourself, right? Another good example I have is I was with a really incredible tutee he's such a fast learner and so clever, and he had this really neat paper about business and marketing. And a lot of the time I was reading it, I was like, I'm not sure whose opinion we're representing here and like what business we're talking about. So I let him know, hey, what if we tried this? What if anytime you see a sentence, what if you make sure you imagine a little kid asking, like, what would a little kid ask about this if you told them? Because little kids want to know everything. They want to know who, what, why, when, where. So I'd ask him, like, what would a little kid say about this sentence? He was like, oh, he'd want to know who we're talking about. I'm like, mm-hmm. So that was really awesome and a really fun guided question. So that'll have them start identifying higher order concerns on their own. And this really ties into the guided questions, right? So if you're asking about like that question about like, what would a little kid ask? Well, a little kid would want to know everything. So this applies to theses with your higher order concerns. Like, what would a little kid want to know about what this paper is about? Oh, he'd want to know everything I talk about. Yeah, pretty much, right? So they'll start doing that, and then make sure you show them where they did something successfully and show them how they can apply it to a weaker area, right? So it's really good to give examples. It can be really empowering to a student and even self-guided, because they know their mind best and they'll know why and how they did something. So if you see them doing something really well, you're like, oh, see how you like added an Oxford comma in this really long list up here? Where else do you think you can incorporate that in your paper? And then they could be like, oh, I know exactly how I did that. I can do this here and here too. And that can be a really cool self-guided way to help them just unleash what they already know on the rest of their paper. So any questions about self-guided strategies? Okay, well, we are 2 slides away from the end. Thanks for hanging in with me here. I want to hear, metacognition is a little bit more of a complicated subject than interpersonal, because, you know, it's less personal, it's more cognitive, it's a little bit more robot, right? So, but do you guys have any experience with metacognitive strategies as a teacher or as a student?
I think this kind of works, and I was kind of proud of it. I had a student who was an art major, and she was a regular. She was one of my EMT students, and she was in the English 102 class, and the professor had just introduced the idea of analysis, and she felt really overwhelmed. She didn't know like where to start, and so I pulled up. So I asked her to pull up some image she'd made or worked with as an artist. And together we analyzed the image specifically through the lens of, okay, you know, by making so A, what artistic choices has the artist made, and B, what do they hope to inspire in the viewer with this artistic choice? And so using what she knew about like what the art invokes in the viewer, she was able to transfer that into like what the author invokes in the reader, and better able to understand analysis. So sorry, that was a long story, but it reminded me of that experience. And yeah, it's always cool when you're able to tap into the prior experiences.
That is such a wonderful and beautiful point, Sabrina, because that's so true. You can use that to show them what they already know about another discipline like art, and then help them apply and bridge that knowledge all the way to another discipline such as literature. And that's one of the really powerful things about metacognition, right? Take what you already know, and not only can you apply it to future situations like that, but completely other situations where it can be a very special tool in your tool belt. It's like how you can use a hammer to put a nail in a wall, right? But you can also use a hammer to open a peanut butter jar. Any other
Absolutely.
Yikes. Any other thoughts on metacognition or tips and tricks from you guys? Yeah, it's okay if nothing comes to mind at the moment. Is there anything a teacher ever did that made you think about the way that you learn? Or like, I think people say the term study habits a lot. They say, oh, when you go to college, figure out your study habits. Is there anything that helped you figure out your study habits? Because that's thinking about your learning. That's metacognition.
I think in like middle school, we learned about like the different kinds of learners, like visual and auditory and all that good stuff. And when I realized that I was one of those learners that just has to write everything down to remember anything, I think that really helped me like take off. And that was just like one of those like little fun facts that they did. I think it was like in a science class in like 7th grade. But honestly, that really helped me, that even now in college, like I will rewrite my notes because that's the only way I'll like remember anything.
Oh, such a good point. I was blown away when I learned about that stuff too. And it helped me because, again, there's nothing quite like writing for a lot of people. Thank you for sharing that. So my last thing here for you all is a thank you slide. Thank you so much for coming to this meeting. I know it's 7:30 and AJ also has a workshop in a moment. But again, thank you for participating fully with me and listening. And I look forward to seeing you all at the tutoring center.
Thank you, Dorothy. You did
Thank
amazing.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Awesome job.
Bye.
Bye. Is AJ coming in at this link, or is it a different link?
I think it's a different link. I think I've got to go there too.
Sounds good. See you there.
Thank you.
Bye.